Good morning and welcome to, what is this one called? Oh, Care During Pregnancy. Yes, Care During Pregnancy. So we've done in the pregnancy seminars, of which this is one workshop, we've covered balancing your hormones. We've gone through a very powerful fear process. We've gone through processes and techniques to help to establish fertility and conception to take place. So now we're assuming that that's happened and the person has become pregnant, and this workshop goes through some really basic and I think the most important part of maintaining a proper pregnancy. There are obviously some things in here that are addressing major concerns people have during pregnancy. One of the major ones, of course, is miscarriage, is the inability to complete the pregnancy. It's a very big concern, and it's actually increasing these days. One of the reasons the statistics is increasing is the effect of in vitro fertilization, because there are actually more miscarriages occurring now because of the IVF program, and so the statistics for miscarriages has gone up because of that, but also they're going up generally anyway because of some very important factors related to stress, and particularly, as you'll notice as we go through, the importance of being hydrated, that is, having enough water in your body to support the process of pregnancy. Dehydration is a secondary effect from the change of hormones that occurs from pregnancy. But it affects the digestive system, it affects the urinary system, it affects just about everything you can think of. So in the process of thinking about taking care of the pregnancy itself, then you have to be aware of the influence of and the need for water. Mandatory. And a lot of the symptoms like morning sickness, constipation, pains, even congested feeling is often related to a lack of water or a lack of circulation of that water. So we'll be looking at how to establish the hydration process, how to get the person to actually metabolize water. Because not even in pregnancy, but at any time, a person can be drinking water and that actually is not hydrating them. Right? There are some checks that are done in various modalities that check for hydration, and giving a glass of water will change that effect, but only temporarily. Because if a person is not metabolizing water, you can drink a glass of water and a few minutes later you're passing the whole glass of water out again. So to metabolize water is very much a kidney-related process. Well, you think about the mechanisms that are happening during pregnancy, they're all basically genetic. And as we've mentioned in other workshops, the genetic control of a pregnancy is done by the kidneys. So if the kidneys are not functioning 100%, and if a person is fearful of something or someone or life in general, or they're afraid of various things during the pregnancy, then they're going to get imbalances occurring in the kidneys. Now that's going to affect not only the fears, it's going to produce the wrong set of hormones, it's going to influence how the water is processed in their body and how the fluids are circulating, or not. The second factor in this is the influence of progesterone. Progesterone is one of those hormones that are mandatory for pregnancy to take place. But the effect of progesterone is one of dehydration. you'll actually lose more water faster, because with the higher amounts of progesterone, it slows down the motility of the gut. In other words, the intestines move less. There's less peristalsis. That means there's less water absorption in the gut, and so automatically the person's not going to be getting as much water as they should. So on top of that, the mechanisms of progesterone affecting the motility of the gut, the mechanisms of basically how the person is taking care of themselves during pregnancy is also a really important factor. There are some basic strains or tension put on the system while the person is pregnant. And of course that's on the reproductive organs. So in most cases, any miscarriages that take place are a combination of two things. A deficiency of kidney function that shows specifically through L3, the lumbar 3, and all the nerve supply and the muscles that are related to that, particularly the psoas muscle, indicate a weakness in the ability of the person to maintain the pregnancy. That weakness can be exaggerated through the hormonal changes. It can be exaggerated through a lack of water. It can be exaggerated through a lack of metabolizing water. It can be exaggerated through congestive processes, right? Lymphatic congestion, for example. And so when the kidney gets to a certain point of not being able to handle all this extra load, it stops. The kidney is one of the most sensitive organs in our body, because when it is overloaded with too much work, it will slow down very quickly. It's a very naughty organ, because it just wants to, lay around and, watch television all day. Well, the trouble is during pregnancy, it doesn't have much time to do that at all. In fact, it has no time to do that, because pregnant women, even when they're sleeping, their kidneys are working more than they would normally. So you have to have really, really good kidney function to maintain fluid circulation and so on, but also to maintain the integrity of the pregnancy all the way through. You have to have good kidneys to be able to have good babies. So, in this process, what I'm going to do is to go through the different modules. Like all specific skills workshops, they're constructed in such a way that there are different neurological modules. Now, some of these modules, and particularly with this context of care during pregnancy, a lot of these modules can be done at any time just to top up the system, just to give it a little bit of a kickstart, So you can use any of these modules in any order that you like, except for the first one. The first one you want to do first, and then you can do any of the others in any order you like. The reason for the first one being so important is that when a woman becomes pregnant, the process itself is a challenge to her genetic inheritance. The fact of being pregnant and making a little person means you're reproducing a genetic process that has been handed down through generations and generations and generations, all the way back to the first one. So just being pregnant or getting pregnant can create a really, really strong challenge to imbalances that you have inherited. These imbalances will tend to come to the surface, so your conscious mind can become aware of them and hopefully find a solution to that and eliminate them. Because when they're eliminated, they can't then affect the developing fetus. That's why our subconscious brings them to the surface. But when they're brought to the surface, often we can see symptoms, and those symptoms are then treated as a disease or some sort of process that requires intervention. But really, you can shortcut that whole process very, very quickly by using Module 1 before you do any of the other modules. So remember, during pregnancy, you're doing two main things. Well, if you're pregnant, you're doing two main things. You guys can just shut your ears for a minute. You're going through a genetic process, and the nature of that process is totally dependent on water. Pregnancy is a water element activity. If you understand Chinese, traditional medicine, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But basically, if the woman doesn't have enough water, can't metabolize water, can't circulate the water, that means that they have to be able to circulate their blood properly. If they can't do that, then the pregnancy is not going to last very long. So you have a genetic process that is challenging the person genetically, that is, all the things that they've inherited, but the process itself is also challenging all of the functions within you that relate to water processing. That's kidneys, water, rehydration, circulation, lymph movement and drainage. All of that stuff is what creates all of the other symptoms that occur during pregnancy. So if you can sort out the genetic stuff, and if you can take care of the water part, you'll take care of 99% of anything that can go wrong, including gestational diabetes, including all sorts of hormonal strange things that happen sometimes with women. And also, when it gets closer to the birthing time, the position of the fetus is always natural if the water processes in the person is balanced. Babies, will get to a point towards the end of the process where they're trying to find their right position to get ready to come out. Well, if they've been given the wrong signals during the process, they go into what we call switching. It's a type of neurological reversal. So they're heading in the wrong direction. So instead of their bum being up this way, their bum's pointing down this way. And so, that's where breech births and all those sorts of complications can occur. There's some very easy ways of reversing those types of neurological, switchings. So the baby will, after rubbing a few points and doing a few things, the baby will just turn around and head in the right direction again. In midwifery, for example, there's some really good techniques for just manually turning the baby around. But unless you do the neurological unit, they'll turn themselves back again. They're little devils, I tell you, and it only gets worse. But, if you give them the right information, they do the right thing every time. There are some really great homeopathics that are not listed here, but if you have any questions about homeopathic preparations for supporting the pregnancy and whatnot, you can ask me later and I'll tell you what I know. So, the workshop is broken up into different neurological modules. The first one, and what I'm going to do is just go through these modules in theory first. I'll go through the theory of a module, then I'll show you on the charts where the related points are, then I'll demonstrate that particular module on Estefania, and if you have any questions, then we leave questions to the end, or we leave questions for each module to end. Okay, we'll leave the question time for the end of the module, so if you have any questions that come up for you relative to a module, then write it down so when we get to question time you remember what to ask. The first module is the genetic factor, the inheritance issue. This is something that, well, I'll put it this way, it's like a second parallel universe. So a person can have any sort of imbalance and we can neurologically reorganize that imbalance, but then because we haven't addressed the inherited part, all that has to happen is that something is experienced in the person's life activates the genetic part, the inherited part, and the problem is back again. So you have to take care of both universes, the now universe and the genetically inherited universe. Right? Well, to do that is actually very simple. There are some reflexes in our body, and you see in the first module that it talks about inheritance. 1.1, check for inheritance, or the check for inheritance is to hold the thumb in the umbilicus. The thumb is actually in the navel, and you have two fingers below and about 50 mil apart and about 25 mil below the umbilicus, and you hold that position. Now, this is waking up whatever genetic information may be relative to what's happening with the person at the time. It's only relative to what's happening with the person at the time. So if you're challenging the person in some way that they were not challenged with 5 minutes ago, this is only going to be relative to what was happening 5 minutes ago. You challenge them, you're going to have to do this again to find out or to wake up the genetically inherited factors related to the current challenge. So it's very much related to what's happening with the person at this time. And that's why you do this before you do any of the other modules, because you're going to wake up the person's awareness of, hey, what's the inherited part of this? All right? And even in some cases, it's a good idea to do this after some of these modules. You'll get to know, you'll actually feel changes happening quite rapidly when you're doing these things in the right order. So practice, play around with them. But to make sure that we get the full benefit of going through the techniques, do this first, wakes up the subconscious awareness of inherited factors. Then when we're doing the techniques, you're actually doing it now, training the nervous system, and that's going to be also related to any inherited factors. So we want to get those two together. So after you've held this point for about 30 seconds, you can do longer if you like, but you've got to be careful with this. If you held this for like, say, 5 minutes, your subconscious will start looking for inherited factors. So if there's nothing wrong with you, from an inherited point of view, you keep holding your fingers in this place and there soon will be. I don't know why people do this, but some people think that a little is good, more is better. No, these are challenges. And because there is so much in us that we could challenge, it's not a good idea to just keep challenging without learning how to overcome the challenges. So holding this point for longer than 60 seconds is not a good idea. So anywhere between 30 and 60 seconds is fine. All right, 30 to 60 seconds, no problems. But if you're going to go further than that, you're going to have more problems coming to the surface, and therefore the modules are not going to be able to cope so well. So with this one, you have to be careful about not holding it too long. Okay? 30 seconds is a really good time. Excuse me. So then, after having done that, holding the points still, then tap L5. I'll show you this on the charts. These breakfast, excuse me. These are the points for the inheritance factors. This is your belly button and the 2 points below, 2 fingers, and you hold these for about 30 seconds. After having held them for 30 seconds, then you go across to L5 here, which is the last lumbar vertebra on the bottom, and you tap these points. The best situation is to continue holding these 3 points while you do the tapping. So you can hold with one hand and you can tap with the other hand. It's okay, you can change hands if you want to and tap the other side. Or you can just hold with one hand, tap one side and then the other side. But the tapping needs to be done, bless you, through a neutral phase of breathing, a big breath in and a big breath out. So you're holding the points, tapping, tapping, breathing in, breathing out. All right, so you're tapping and holding all the way through. That will give the subconscious the awareness that you want to know about inheritance factors, anything that may be related to what you're doing. The tapping of the lumbar points helps to create a neurological impulse that becomes associated with whatever is now going on in the brain, and the phases of respiration help to tie that in with lots of different functions that are going on in your body. So the combination of those three things is really very powerful. And sometimes I've given pregnant women just that as an exercise to do as homework, and they've had just really easy pregnancies. No problems at all, where beforehand, previous children in previous pregnancies had created quite a lot of problems for them. In fact, in one woman who was suffering a lot from morning sickness, her mother was in bed for 8 months of the pregnancy to try to avoid morning sickness. She found that if she laid still, she didn't have morning sickness. But if she got up, all sorts of, things resulted. But in doing this as homework for this woman, the daughter, she came in for morning sickness after doing some neurological training and giving her this as homework. After 3 days, she had no more morning sickness, and that was it. She didn't have any more morning sickness through the whole pregnancy. Some people have morning sickness through the whole pregnancy, which must be horrible, Not only is that horrible, but it's also very dangerous because they can become dehydrated extremely quickly. And remember, pregnancy is dependent on having lots of water. So morning sickness can be a real threat to the stability of a pregnancy process. So that's the first module. Stephanie, let's have a look at your belly button and we'll show you how to do this one. Okay, thank you. Do you have a belly button with you?
I think so.
Oh, good. Okay. So, probably the easiest way is to use your thumb in the belly button and 2 fingers underneath. So, put your thumb in the belly button, 2 fingers. Great. So, she holds that for 30 seconds. In the process of doing that, right, her subconscious is now activating any inherited conflicts that may be there relative to whatever she's doing at the moment. So if she's thinking about finances, then it'll be bringing up inherited factors around finances. If she's thinking about what she ate for breakfast, it'll be bringing up inherited factors around her response to the food for breakfast. So if you're pregnant, a portion of your attention is always on the pregnancy. A pregnant woman is never completely unaware of her pregnancy, even if she thinks she is. Even when she's asleep, she's still paying attention to that pregnancy. It's a full-time job for women. And it really is. And anything can influence that awareness. So holding these points, she keeps holding the points, just turn around, and we go to the lowest vertebra on the back, the L5, and we tap this point on both sides. She takes a big breath in and a big breath out. Good. And that's all that's involved. Now you can do that yourself. Take it off. We don't want too much inheritance stuff coming up. All right, so hold the points back in again, and you can tap L5 on one side, right? neutral. She breathes in, breathes out. You can tap the other side, L5. Neutral. She breathes in, she breathes out, and it's done. Okay, great. Thanks for that. Good. All right, so that's the first module. You want to do that before any of the other modules. Okay? Now, if you think like maybe it's a good idea to do it after the module, then you can do that as well. You can't create problems for yourself if you tap L5 after holding the points. But if you just hold the points and you don't tap L5, I'm not going to be held responsible for what happens. Right? So you know you have to tap L5 after holding those points. Okay, module 2 in care during pregnancy relates specifically to dehydration. Really, really, really such an important factor. That's why it's the first module. Just about every pregnant woman that I've seen as a client has been dehydrated. Some of them mask the dehydration, but then that's because other symptoms have become more acute and become a higher priority. Once those related imbalances are corrected, then up comes the dehydration. So in every case where a woman is having a problem with pregnancy, you're going to have to look at the hydration issue. It's either dehydration or their inability to metabolize the water, which leads to dehydration. This particular module relates to the fact that when you have an increase of progesterone, you will have a decrease in your ability to absorb water through the intestines. Part of the problem is that the liver finds it a little bit difficult to break down the extra progesterone that's being produced. It normally does not have to break down so much progesterone. But the liver has the job of breaking down any unused hormones in the system. That's part of its job. Well, if it's too busy doing other things, like having an allergy reaction to something, for example, or you're having lots of sugar and it has to metabolize the sugars, or maybe you're having a lot of fried food, and so the liver has to, create lots of antioxidants and break down the fats and the rancid molecules and so on, then it's not going to be paying attention to breaking down the hormones. And it says, well, the hormones are not dangerous because, you've produced them yourself anyway, so I'll just put them back out into the bloodstream. So now the person has a condition that demands higher progesterone, and you have more progesterone being produced or being put back into the bloodstream by the liver. The result is that the person becomes more dehydrated. So part of this process of balancing the progesterone in the liver is done between the liver and the pancreas. The pancreas has hormonal functions called insulin primarily, and insulin is used by the liver in lots of different ways, and one of the ways is to help it break down progesterone. It actually uses one hormone to break down another hormone. It's sort of like if you have a big lump of grease, really thick grease, right? And you get that on your hands and it's like a layer of black stuff, right? If you were to wash your hands with soap and water, it wouldn't wash off. You just cover the soap with grease. But if you got an oil and you washed your hands with oil, the oil would dissolve the thicker grease, but now you'd have oil on your hands. All right? Now you'd have oil on your hands. All right? Some people have other things on their hands. So in the process of getting rid of the oil, you could use a thinner oil. Right? So you wash the thicker oil off with the thinner oil. Now you've got thin oil. Now you can wash it with soap and water to wash the thin oil off. The liver does the same thing with progesterone. Progesterone is a very greasy hormone. It's a fat hormone. In fact, it has a lot of fat molecules in it. And it actually uses insulin, which is a thinning hormone. Right? It's actually a very fine hormone. It gets right into the cells sometimes to break down the progesterone. So this relationship between the liver and the pancreas is very important for being able to metabolize the excess progesterone. Now, women are producing this progesterone all the time. So the relationship then between the liver and the pancreas to the liver is really, really important. And these relationships actually have different neurological circuits connected to them. And that's what this module is about. So the first step in this module is to touch the liver point. Well, where's that? Let's have a look on the chart. Now, over here you see, if we count down the ribs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, between ribs 5 and 6 is a large reflex, and it's only on the right side that relates to liver function. Right? It's a liver reflex. So for most people, this is where the breast actually attaches to the chest. Right? That crease, that join, is pretty much right on that reflex. Now, for women, particularly pregnant women who are preparing lots of milk for their babies, you might have to go searching for this point. But it's where the breast attaches to the chest. All right? That's the liver point. If you follow the big blue arrow, and we count down the ribs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, between ribs 6 and 7, basically level with the nipple line, is a reflex for pancreas. All right? This is a specific organ reflex for pancreas. So in the process, you first touch the liver point. Right? You touch the liver point for a few seconds. Then you touch the pancreas points. Right? 1, 2. You don't touch them at the same time. You do liver first, then pancreas. That challenges that relationship, the liver to the pancreas, because it has its own neurological circuitry that supports that relationship. So you touch the liver first, and then the pancreas. Then you'll see what you have to do to reorganize the circuitry is to tap vertebra on the back, T2, T5, T8, and T5 again. And you do these on the 3 phases of respiration. Okay? Then you do the reverse. You touch the pancreas point first, then the liver points. Now you're holding this combination for about 30 seconds, but you do, one organ, then the other, then you're holding them for 30 seconds. That order is important because of the different neurology behind it. So 2.3, you touch the pancreas first, then the liver, then you tap T5, T2, T5, and then T8, in that order. So what you're doing is you're re-establishing the relationship between the liver to the pancreas, and you're re-establishing the relationship from the pancreas to the liver. All right? In other words, I'm telling you I've got too much progesterone. I'm telling you I don't have enough insulin to help you out. Oh gosh. Well, if that happens, then the progesterone levels increase remarkably, and with that increase comes a decrease of retention of water. It really is a major problem. Unfortunately, it's a physiological reality. Our biochemistry just works that way because of the effects of progesterone. I'm not going to go into all the list of all the effects that these hormones have. Talk to Ursula. She could talk an elephant's ear off with what she knows about hormones, right? But that relationship must be balanced to be able to, at least be able to maintain a certain level of water in the system. Because if the mother becomes dehydrated, the amniotic fluid has a higher priority than she does. That means that if she loses water, she has problems, but the water that is available will still go into the amniotic fluid to help support the baby. That is a very, very high priority. And sometimes you see women who are very dehydrated, but they've got this huge bump in front of them, right, which is where all the water is going. Right? They really need to have, these circuits activated so that they can get the water back in their system again. They can really go into very serious problems from doing that. All right, Estefania is going to volunteer herself for science. She didn't know that, but I just did it for her. Okay, so she first touches the liver point. Now, in women, that's probably a little bit under the bra line because, that's where the breast attaches. Hold that point for, maybe 5 seconds, and then come across to ribs 6 and 7, more in the front, over here. Down. There, good. Looks a little bit high. Just put it down a little bit. So here's 5 and 6, 6 and 7, so we're in here. That's the point. Good. Now, she holds that for 30 seconds. Now, what's happening in her brain is the brain is saying, liver, then pancreas. What? What do you want? What's going on? What am I paying attention to here? So it starts looking at what's going on between the liver to the pancreas. And it goes, that's got hormone stuff attached to it. And other things as well, not just hormones, but during pregnancy, this is a mandatory part of organising the water levels. So if she keeps holding the points, and I'm just doing this for sake of making it better for her, but she can let go of the points. Excuse me, I'm just jealous she's got so much hair. I just like to feel her hair. Anyway, we start with tapping T2. So if we go from disappeared. If we go down the neck to the first bump, the first obvious vertebra, that's C7. So the next one is T1, and the one under that is T2. And the one under that is T2. So, as she is not taking any particular focus on breath, and we start tapping. Right, now you don't have to keep holding the points on the front and tap at the same time because you'd probably need 3 arms to do that. And we don't have that. So big breath in and big breath out. Good. When you're taking a breath in, take a big breath in and hold it. And then a big breath out and hold it. Right? Don't just go, because it doesn't give you the neurological range of activity that you're looking for. Okay? So if she was to do that, she's held the points. Now she comes back to the back up here and taps T2. Can you do that? Good. Tapping, tapping, tapping. Then she takes a big breath in, big breath out. Okay. The second point is T5. Now this one's a bit more difficult to get to. That if you can actually count it down, T2, T3, T4, T5 is here, and it's usually halfway along the border of the scapula. Oh, she can do it. Very good. If you can't, it's a bit difficult. Yeah. You're a bit high. That's all right. I'll do it. Don't worry about it. If you can't do it yourself, find a doorknob. All right, and just go boink, 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 boink. It works. Right? There are actually devices. Some massage companies have made little devices that you can use to massage the points. You can use them to tap just as effectively. Right? Just, you can even make something, just like some bendy thing and put a knob on it, tap it on the back. Or you can say to your person sitting next to you, oh, look, I've got this bit of a pain in the back. Can you tap just here? And you're going, breathing in and breathing out. And there's T5. So it's usually the halfway mark along the border of the scapula. Just halfway, come across. You can count it down. Or from the base of the scapula, you can come across as T7, T6, T5. So you can come down from the top or up from the bottom, but that's sort of how you find the position for those points. Then we do T8. Right, so we were 5 here, 7, 8 is down here. So we tap, big breath in and out. Good. Remember, the base of the scapula come across is T7. All right, 1 down, T8. Also remember that the thoracic vertebrae at the top are much closer together than the ones down the bottom. So you've got more spacing happening in the lower part than in the upper part. Just like when you're doing your counting, it's not 1, 2, 3. No, it doesn't work that way. You actually have to feel the spinous processes, right, to do the counting. Okay. Then we go back to T5, right, in the middle of the scapula again. Start tapping. Take a big breath in and out. Good. Turn around. Now that has reset the neurological circuits that maintain the relationship between liver to pancreas. Now we just do the reverse. All right? She first touches the pancreas point, all right, holds that for a few seconds just to make the brain aware that she's touching herself somewhere. Then she touches the liver. All right. Now she'll hold that for about 30 seconds or so. If you held this for 2 minutes, you're just wasting time. You need at least 30 seconds, up to 60 seconds if you can't count, but it really only needs about 30 seconds to wake up the brain's attention to these relationships. So we'll pretend that's 30 seconds. To reset these ones, turn around again. Good. Hair out of the way. Beautiful. So we start now with this lot on T5. And this is really good because where I was tapping before shows the points. So again, halfway along the border of the scapula, we're starting at T5. Big breath in and out. Now, I'm not tapping the middle of the vertebra, I'm tapping either side on what's called the transverse processes, right, where the vertebra has these little wings that stick out the side. You want to be tapping over those wings because that's what stimulates the neurological activity that's related to that vertebral level. Then we go up to T2. Clunk is C7. Tunk, 1, 2. Big breath in and out. Good. Then we go to T5 again. Big breath in and out. And then we finish this one with T8. Big breath in and out. Great. Good. And that's reset then the relationship between the pancreas to the liver. So we've done liver to the pancreas, and then the second part is pancreas back to the liver. Now the liver and the pancreas can communicate with each other and, be able to work together now to reorganize what to do with the progesterone. and other things. This helps with other biochemical processes in the person. And also, if a person has gestational diabetes, their blood sugar levels are going up through pregnancy, this is also a really good way of stabilising that process. And sometimes it reverses it completely. It's a very nice thing to do. It also shows too that when a woman is having gestational diabetes, she's probably also quite dehydrated. Right? Because that relationship between the liver and the pancreas and vice versa is not working properly. Right? But they think that if they just drink more water, then they're okay. But you'll see from the next module that that may be very not true, very untrue, or not very true. Well, it's not correct anyway. So, anyway, thank you for that. Great. Okay. It's time for Module 3. Well, why not? We've got plenty of time, so we'll do Module 3. Water metabolism. A lot of people don't even realise that you actually have to not just have water in you, you have to be able to utilise it. And that's what's called water metabolism. It's not just a matter of putting the water into your body so that you can dilute the chemicals and the enzymes and the hormones and the bloodstream. You have to be able to distribute the water so that you've got the best advantage of having the water in your body. For example, if a person cannot metabolize water properly and they're studying, right? They're studying for an exam, for example, they're going to need more water in their brain to support all their brain activity. But if they have bad water metabolism, the water could be in their kidneys but not in their brain. It could be in their feet and their legs are swelling up, but their brain isn't getting any of the water. You find this with people who travel in aeroplanes quite often, with their legs, accumulate water. They have a bad water metabolism. They're not able to distribute the water properly. Now, they may also have a bad circulation problem, but we'll deal with that in the following module. To be able to metabolize water means you can mobilize it, you can use it to collect toxins, and you can use it to take the toxins away. But if you can't metabolize the water, you don't get the water to the toxic area, so the toxins just become more concentrated. Even worse, if you don't have enough water in you in the first place, a la dehydration, then the toxins concentrate. They become more toxic. So you find that women who are pregnant will tend to react much, much more to different foods, to different medications, right? To different chemicals in the air. They become very sensitive to molds and funguses and stuff. Look, the mother of my second daughter, Sierra, Jenny, her mother, can smell bacteria in these bottles. She can open up a bottle of water and smell it, so, no, it's bacteria in that. And she's right. She can come into my house and she can say, oh, so-and-so was here, because she can smell the remains of the perfume. So-and-so was there 2 weeks before. It's like, this is like a radar, It just knows everything. Well, that happened after becoming pregnant. She was already fairly sensitive anyway, but after pregnancy, it was really amazing. And she's kept the ability. So she can smell her way through just about anything. It's really quite amazing. So that's really just a point to exaggerate or to give an example of the fact that when women become unable to metabolize their water, they become much more sensitive in every area. All of their senses become more acute, right? Especially touch, And this is why some of them will react to the smell of food or the smell of somebody, right? Or the smell, they can smell what's happening later on. They can smell what's happening with their kids. The kids, oh, pants need changing. And you go, what? Yeah, kid's done poo. What? And you go along, fair enough, there it is, waiting for you. They can tell you exactly when the child did the poo because they can pick it up. It's really amazing. It's a very scary thing. All right, so how do we reorganise this metabolism? Well, there is a particular point on the central vessel meridian, the traditional Chinese meridian that runs up and down the centre of your body, which is a little bit confused in a lot of people because when a woman is pregnant, the central vessel is supposed to be running down, not up. All right? Now, the problem with that is, of course, when the woman wants to go off and study something or read a magazine or, do something with her head, she's now in conflict with the natural flow of energy of the central meridian running down. It runs down to feed energy into the nervous system of the baby. That's its job at that point. In fact, it's one of its major jobs in women, is to take the energy down and help to develop the central nervous system of the baby. It actually connects with the kidney meridians to do that. Well, normally what happens is if we're using our brain, the energy of the meridian, central meridian, should be running up to feed the brain the energy. Right? So when women want to study something while they're pregnant, they actually put themselves in conflict with the preferred flow of energy. So if they want to do that, that's fine. They do just run the meridian up a couple of times, do their study, but then they run it down when they're finished. Right? And that puts the energy back, heading towards the baby. Now, you have to be aware of this because there are many women who hold now, professional positions. They have a lot of responsibility. They're doing, very important jobs where they employ, hundreds of people, and they naturally will try and bring the energy up to their head because they've got lots to think about. That doesn't help the pregnancy, not at all. In fact, it creates an internal conflict that activates their adrenal system, and those adrenal hormones are going to be in direct opposition to the hormones that they need to maintain a nice, happy pregnancy, like progesterone and particularly oxytocin. Oxytocin and adrenaline don't like each other. And women who are, using their head a lot are changing the direction of the central vessel. That's putting them into an internal conflict between themselves and their baby, and secondarily, they'll bring on a lot of adrenal reactions. Their oxytocin will go down, and they will say, I don't feel connected to my baby. You'll hear them say that. It feels like it's not a part of me, it's something else. Well, that's an indication that the central meridian is running in the wrong direction. They're trying to make it run up. No, it should be running down. Just run it down. Just literally drag along the center of their body to make it go down. Show them how to do it. All right? It's okay to do mental stuff. You run the meridian up, you do the mental stuff, but then you run it down again to reset it to support the pregnancy. Because if it gets stuck in the running up position, the baby will be affected. So will the mother. All right? She's going to have stress from other things, jobs and activities that she's doing, but she's also going to create an internal stress because the baby will now actually start demanding more energy in other ways. So internal adrenal reactions start happening and she will tend to disconnect from the baby. And that's not the ideal situation. So that's why one of the points on the central meridian relates to hydration, because it's a necessary part of how the baby is developing. So CV13, if you go from the belly button to the xiphoid process, right, exactly halfway is CV12. Well, 1 finger width up is CV13. This is the point that activates basically it activates all the circuits related to water, particularly water metabolism. So you hold this point, you only have to hold it, you don't have to rub it, you just hold the point for about 30 seconds. Then you tap T2, T4, T6, T8, T10 and T12. If you can count by even numbers, you know what points to rub, or what vertebra to tap. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. In that order. So it's actually a very primal circuit in our body and is a very important one. So let's see if Estefania is around. And, oh, there she is. Would you like to drag your water metabolism out here and we'll have a play? Thanks. All right, so she holds CV13 between the belly button and the xiphoid process. Halfway is 12, 1 inch above that is CV13. So she just holds the point. If you're not sure, go sort of somewhere halfway between there and use a few fingers and just hold the area. It's really okay to do that. This is telling the brain, hey, pay attention to water stuff, because we're going to do something to help the water metabolism and the brain needs to be involved. All right? And you'd be surprised to know that often the brain is not involved in a lot of what your body functions are doing. Scary. All right, turning around, hair out of the way. Now, in this case, she does not have to continue holding the point. Once you've held it for 30 seconds, the brain's got the message. So now we just go by the number, basically. We've got our first bump, C7, 1, 2, and we start tapping. Big breath in and out. All right, from 2, 3, 4, big breath in, out. Good. 5, 6. Out. 7, 8. And out. 9, 10. And out. 11, 12. And out. Good. So we've just gone 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Really difficult, right? But that resets the water metabolism to a complete range of organs right through her body. That means now all the organs are going to function better, plus any water that she actually puts into her body can actually now be utilised more effectively. Okay? So that's water metabolism. Great. Thanks a lot.